Welcome to the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast, presented by the Beef Cattle Research Council, the most popular content from beefresearch.ca, available on the go. Before we get into today's episode, a quick message from the BCRC. Our understanding of pain management in beef cattle has come a long way thanks to Canadian research and producers stepping up to the plate to implement pain reduction strategies. Current research is looking at the efficacy of lidocaine-infused castration bands on managing acute and chronic indicators of pain in beef calves. These bands contain a slow-release local anesthetic to provide pain relief for up to 42 days after the procedure is completed. To find out more, visit the link in the show notes. This episode is titled, Where There Are Cattle, There Are Parasites. 9 Tips for Managing Parasites in Your Herd. Are your cattle itchy and scratchy? Have you noticed reduced feed intake or altered grazing behavior? These can be signs of a parasite problem in your herd. Effective parasite management is a balancing act. On the one hand, controlling parasites is essential for maintaining cattle health, welfare, and productivity. On the other hand, overuse of some treatment methods can lead to parasite resistance, which negatively impacts the long-term health of the herd and can also affect the environment. The type of parasite present and the magnitude of the problem will vary based on different factors such as animal health, geography, season, and management scenarios. Therefore, it is important to take a multifaceted approach when combating parasites. Here are 9 tips to help manage parasites on your farm. Tip number 1. Meet animal nutritional requirements and maintain cattle in good body condition. Healthy cattle are less susceptible to the impacts of both internal and external parasites. When cattle are thin and have nutritional deficiencies, their ability to cope with parasites is reduced. Routine feed testing should be implemented to ensure rations are properly balanced and to correct any nutritional deficiencies that may be present. Tip number 2. Implementing biosecurity protocols on your farm focused on parasite prevention and control. New cattle introduced onto your farm can be a source of external and internal parasites that can contaminate your cattle and pastures. Have a proactive biosecurity plan in place, which may mean quarantining new entrants. Isolate and inspect new animals for lice or other parasites and treat them 10 to 14 days prior to allowing them to join the rest of the cattle to prevent infesting the main herd. When treating, use a combination of control products from 2 different dewormer classes, such as ivermectin plus febendazole, to minimize the risk of bringing resistant parasites into your farm. Consult your veterinarian to discuss your parasite biosecurity program. Tip number 3, ensure pastures are rested between grazing periods to help reduce parasite load. Infective larvae cannot survive for a long time after hatching without being ingested by a host animal, so providing a pasture rest period helps break that cycle. The length of the rest periods for pastures will vary depending on factors such as forage species, level of utilization, and environmental conditions. Tip number 4. Monitor parasite burdens by conducting fecal egg counts on your herd. This will allow assessment of internal parasite loads and determine which parasites you need to target. Consult your veterinarian on the most appropriate sampling strategy to use. The results from the fecal egg counts must be interpreted in the context of your grazing management, production practices, and parasite control regimes. Tip number 5, avoid overstocking and overgrazing. Parasites are more likely to spread when cattle are in close proximity to one another. For example, lice are mainly spread through animal-to-animal contact, and the more crowded animals are, the greater risk of spread. Ensure adequate stocking density in all locations where cattle are kept. Overstocked pastures lead to increased contamination with parasite larvae through the buildup of manure. Similarly, when pastures become overgrazed, the cattle ingest a greater amount of parasite larvae due to grazing closer to the fecal paths and closer to the ground where the number of larvae is the highest. Tip number 6, consider rotational grazing strategies. Whenever possible, avoid grazing the same pastures in the fall of one year and the spring of the next. Infective parasite larvae from eggs deposited in manure in the fall may survive the winter and be a source of contamination for cows and calves grazing these pastures in the spring. If rotational grazing is being utilized, consider grazing younger animals first, followed by older cows. This will allow the younger, more susceptible animals to graze the cleanest pastures. Tip number 7, avoid harrowing pastures until the weather is hot and dry. Harrowing pastures breaks up manure pats and exposes infective larvae and eggs to the elements. When the weather is hot and dry, this can be an effective method of reducing parasite populations. However, harrowing under other conditions will increase the potential exposure of cattle to infective larvae that are scattered from fecal pats across the area. Tip number 8, call chronic parasite carriers. Some cattle, about 1 to 2%, can be chronic carriers of external parasites, such as lice. These cattle perform poorly and act as a source of reinfection for other animals. Even after treatment, these cattle will remain infected and should be removed from the herd. Tip number 9, use chemical treatments effectively and responsibly. There is an assortment of products available on the market which were developed to control specific parasites through a specific mode of action for a specified length of time. Work with your veterinarian to develop a strategic control program that balances the best practices with the practical realities of herd management. And use the 5 C's of parasite control. Use the correct product, apply to the correct class of animal, apply at the correct time, use the correct dose, and check for efficacy. It is natural for cattle to have parasites, and you will never be able to eliminate them 100% from your herd. However, implementing simple and effective strategies can help you to keep parasite populations low. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find all relevant links and information at beefresearch.ca or in the show notes. The Beef Cattle Research Council is funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and strives for excellence in the production of Canadian beef, cattle, and forage through research, innovation, and extension. Tune in every Tuesday as the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast delivers straightforward insights, expert information, and a wealth of practical knowledge for Canadian beef producers. Subscribe now.